Welcome to my art form.
It's time for Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing our minds.
Yeah, baby.
With your hosts, Dark and Ainsley Sevier.
Maybe what they believe about reality isn't all of reality.
What?
I know, right?
We're on a mission to have a better time with more people more often.
The question is more like, how do you get there?
Post-Orthodoxy explores strongly held beliefs, how those belief systems divide or connect people, and what might be found beyond those reality bubbles.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
I've got a piece of chocolate here with me because I got anxiety about doing this.
Welcome to this neighborhood, neighbor.
All right, here we are.
Live
again from Sevier Studios.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 3.
It's true. Oh my gosh, we're really doing it. How exciting. And I have a mixer board. It is nice to be manhandling a mixer board again after so long away from KBMF Studios.
Yes.
That was one of my favorite things, was running the mixing board, just like...
being mission control.
Yeah, like I was really running a spaceship. That was one of the funnest things that the kids got to do on the Jolly Roger radio show also.
Push the buttons.
Was learn how to push all the buttons and make the actual music happen for the people of Butte. Something that I can't offer them here in the studios.
No music. We can't afford ASCAP.
No, but we're going to find a way to create a space that the kids find valuable somehow.
Yeah. Should I start off with a disclaimer?
Yeah, so we have a disclaimer to start off with.
What's the phrase?
Viewer discretion.
No. There's the consent language.
Oh, content warning and trigger warning?
Yes, this is consent language.
Yeah.
You should know what you're in for. Apparently, some people listen to our shows and do not have a good time, or the opposite of it, have a bad time.
They have a bad time listening to our shows.
And feel things
yes.
that they, I guess, don't want to feel. So
yeah,
we're going to do a content warning, a viewer discretion warning. And I read it straight through last time, but you can comment if you have any comments about how to change this and refine this as we move in.
I think short and sweet is better. Eventually we were going to record it, and then you'll just see a little video of us pop up on the couch and be like, hey, folks.
Right. The opinions and views expressed on this program are subject to change. Future Dark and Ainsley may not agree with present or past Dark and Ainsley. That is the point of this show. Welcome to Post-Orthodoxy.
Welcome to Post-Orthodoxy.
Should I go further?
We don't even like all the things that we say on this show.
No. Sometimes I listen to other shows and I say, wow, I said that?
Oh, what were we thinking?
I guess I'm growing as an individual.
Right. Folks, we want to hear from you, and I'm going to remind you a few times over the course of the evening, but we have this chat bot here in the middle because this is an interactive podcast.
Right.
We want to be having conversations with you guys, and you guys helped us raise money to buy this equipment so that we can all be having conversations together.
So for people who are just joining in, we have a new phrase for ourselves. We are social extremophiles.
What's an extremophile?
An extremophile is a file that lives in an extreme. It's a phylum. It's a phylum, I guess.
Oh, it's like a bibliophile. It's a thing. The thing is not included, right? The filio is loving. It loves extremeness.
Extremophile.
Like bibliophiles are people that love books.
I'll have to look it up.
The philia is the love.
But yeah, they actually can exist in. So we have extremophiles in the Berkeley pit. They found an extremophile, which is something that's it's living where people didn't think anything could possibly live.
Enjoys living.
This is battery acid? Great.
Oh, my favorite.
So we consider ourselves somewhat social extremophiles, having been born and raised in right-wing Christian cult-level organizations.
This is the part where I want to have like a board where I can draw things and it'll show up on camera. Maybe I need one of those old, I don't know what the modern day version of it, a little
the projector,
iPad where I can write things and it'll show up on the camera. Like, here's how much of the country still believes these things, and that percentage, and then there's, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
So as social extremophiles, we swim in conditions that other people would either, like Goldilocks, might be a little too hot or might be a little too cold for their taste. I've had people say that we're totally weak sauce. We don't go far enough.
That's always funny.
Right? And other people that are like, I can't believe you're saying the things. And so I'm not sure. These are the waters we swim in, and they may not be the waters you swim in. So this show may not be for everybody.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we want to say is, like, it's really okay. one, you might not like long-form online conversations, and that's fine too. We have a short attention span these days as a culture, and you might have turned to the internet just to have a wee bit of entertainment in the evening and not perhaps a long discussion about trauma responses, and trauma awareness. But if you do like long-form conversations, you might not like long-form conversations that are as challenging as the conversations that Dark and I like to have.
So, yeah, we're keeping it pretty. We're just wading in.
We're going in nice and easy.
We're ankle deep so far, having a good time.
No super controversial topics.
No.
Although some of the things that we discussed last week with Robin White are outside of the mainstream understanding of the Native American experience in the U.S.
Yes.
There are still a lot of people in the U.S. that don't know. We were just talking with a friend of ours this morning who is realizing, as she interacts with more people on the planet, that not everybody knows all the things that she knows, that she was raised pretty what you might call woke, aware of racial issues, aware of LGBTQ plus issues, aware of a more accurate picture of U.S. history, and that like large swaths of the U.S. don't know that there were already millions and millions and millions of Native Americans on the country already when Europeans came and took it.
Right.
Lots of people in the U.S. don't know that still.
That's a story that still is not known by some folks who grew up with a particular style of education.
I grew up in an extreme group.
Yeah.
And only found out that I had been told things that were inaccurate when I experienced some kind of unhappiness. You don't question your reality until you experience something negative that makes you want to question it.
Right.
Like people are like, well, but they should know to ask. But you don't know to ask. You don't know to ask if there's nothing wrong. If there's nothing wrong, why would you think that the way you think reality is not the way you think reality is?
Which brings us to our show, the idea of, we have talked about on season 1, we did mention a little bit. We never really took a deep dive into the concept of religious syndrome.
Religious trauma syndrome.
Religious trauma syndrome.
Not officially recognized in the DSM-5 yet.
No, but the implications of it being recognized by the DSM-5, what's it called now?
That's like the book. That's the number. That's the 5th version of the book.
That
tells you all of the things that could be wrong with your mind.
Conditions.
Yes.
The various conditions, psychic, psycho, spiritual. I guess spiritual is not in there because it's the DSM-5, but different states of mind, conditions. I don't know what the politically correct term for.
Right. Well, there's a lot of different perspectives we could look at mental health through. Right. The DSM-5 tends to look at the state of your mind from a perspective of health versus not health, or health versus the lack of health, or health versus less health than Johnny.
Oh, I was having this discussion last night, wherever the bar is, you have to hope that the bar is healthy.
Right.
It's
assuming that the people who wrote the DSM-5 know what a healthy mindscape is.
Right. So there's a premise. There's the premise. I guess that's what they call sanity.
Of what normal is.
They used to call it sanity.
Right.
And then the definition of sanity is, I looked it up in one dictionary at one point, and what I got from that definition was that sanity is the majority accepted reality. So what everybody can just wink and nod and go, that's sane.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean it's correct.
It's just, you must be sane because that's what me and most of the people I know are like.
So at one point, you could be racist and see the other racist and go, that's right.
Right.
And that was sane.
Yes, and that was normal.
Because that was normal reality.
That was the orthodox.
So that was sane.
That's the way everything was. Obviously, they're not humans. As much as we're humans.
That was the premise. So to buck that system and say, hey, no, this is another human that deserves the same dignity and treatment as any other human, that's crazy talk when the sane agreement is that they're not the same as us.
Right.
So the DSM-5 is really talking about sanity. That's like a super superficial way to talk about, sanity. Where's the bar for sanity? And for me, I feel like it's health. Like, are you having a healthy experience in the world, or is your anxiety crippling you? Are your insecurities withering you away? Or like, that's not healthy.
Right.
And a lot of people have insecurities about how to fit into the normal world.
Or are you healthy? Are you able to operate and function on a daily basis without causing harm to anybody around you?
Ooh.
A lot of people experience lacks of mental health that cause them to be harmful to people in their communities or people in their families. For instance, I was kind of a secondary caregiver for my pastor's son growing up, he had Down syndrome and autism, and he would sometimes be so happy to see someone that he knew that he would hold your hand and squeeze it really, 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 really hard.
Right.
Now, if he had a different kind of mental landscape, he would be able to recognize my winces of pain. He would be able to understand me when I spoke English and asked him not to do that. He would be able to realize that when other people shook his hands, he would have the memory that it didn't feel that same way when other people shook his hand. But because of his mental landscape being outside of mainstream mental landscapes, he wasn't able to recognize those things. And so we might call that a slight lack of health, because he did sometimes cause harm because of his state of his mind.
But he wasn't aware of the harm that he was.
In that case, he wasn't.
Didn't seem to be aware of the harm that he's causing.
And that's one of the things that I think is going to be the basis that I want to keep coming back to, a hook, as it were, with our conversation today around mental health, around trauma, which is that my current hypothesis is that people don't do bad things for no reason. And that goes in the face of the current moral mindset in the U.S., which is highly influenced by Judeo-Christianity, whether you mean to be or not, which is that sometimes people just screw up, people are just selfish, people are just lazy, and that's just the way people are. And that's a biblical story. The biblical story is that you were born broken, and that's why you need Jesus.
Yeah, it's a rough premise. I've had a hard time with that premise for a while.
Lots of people in the U.S. carry that story around in themselves. You're born broken, and you've got to fight against it your whole life. Your natural inclinations are selfish and harmful and lazy. And that is not I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think maybe
I don't that's not been my experience.
But it allows us to just be mad and hateful at people who cause harm, because we don't see that they're causing harm because they were harmed. This Judeo-Christian mindset that you were born broken and you have to fight against it your whole life enables us to just be mad and hateful at someone who causes harm, because it takes away the story behind the story, which is that people don't do bad things for no reason.
I think it's a common story with bullies. We've seen it play out
over and over
in art and literature, where you're like, that kid is just obviously a bad kid.
Just a bad kid.
Doing bad things, abusing his power, being stronger than somebody else, and rubbing their face in the mud or whatever. Almost always you find out that their parents are doing the same thing to them.
Yes.
They're paying forward what is being done to them.
The cycle of abuse.
And I don't necessarily think that's because he was born that way. I think you end up learning to pay, it's a fascinating cycle of abuse, begetting abuse. And the generations that are coming in, the millennials, Gen Z, they are talking about this. They are realizing that, somewhere in our sane society, there's been some divergence by people who no longer feel it's sane, and the culture itself sort of moving into what I feel like is a more sort of restrictive, conformist direction.
All of those big words kind of lost me just there.
Right.
What are you trying to say?
Let me go back.
Okay.
So the idea of the bullying doesn't happen for no reason.
Bullies don't bully for no reason. They don't just wake up one day and decide to treat another kid like shit.
One thing that I was one of those kids that was kind of skinny and gawky and weird. And so I got sort of shoved around the hallway by the football players, guys that had some different physicality going on than I did. I was just like bones trying to find some meat to cover them because they just kept growing.
Right.
And then you had these other guys that looked like
Grown men.
like men, right? And so they come and shove you out like a make fun of you because you're skinny, or made fun of me because I was skinny. Mm-hmm. And I always thought, how could anybody be so cruel? How could anybody who has that power and that strength abuse it in that way? And then years later, I ended up in Los Angeles, and a good friend who was not afraid to say things honestly to me brought to my attention that I had become a bully. But I didn't notice it.
You weren't pushing and shoving people.
No, I was doing it with my conversational skills.
You were being an intellectual bully.
I was finding ways to screw with people in a way where those people didn't know they were being screwed with, but the audience knew that they were being screwed with. So I was taking advantage of their weak points and exposing them to everybody as a skill that I had learned as a stand-up comedian, as a comic.
Right.
Somebody talks to you, and they're fair game. They're fair game.
You can just poke at them.
Right. But then I realized that there's a line and where I am not wielding my intelligence or my wit, but I'm abusing it. And so a lot of people think of bullies as just being, the guy,
mindless thugs.
The guys from The Simpsons. The stereotype of the guy from The Simpsons. And again, abused, impoverished background. Yeah. It's the same story over and over. But there's so many different ways to be a bully. You can be an intellectual bully. You can be a social bully by bullying people who are not conforming to the same social norms that you're conforming to.
Which I think comes back to the Judeo-Christian story that's pervasive in our culture, which is that it's okay to make fun of those people because they're just that way. It's okay to make fun of those people or be mad at those people because they're just that way. Instead of, I shouldn't make fun of those people or be mad at those people because they're only doing that because they were harmed.
Maybe they're not having a real good time. So for me, it's kind of, that's the question, is if somebody, we were talking this morning, I haven't been doing much of the politics on Facebook because as everybody that I talk to attests, I just stopped doing it because it's become too inflammatory and divisive, like out the gate. There's no nuance. There's no discussing policy ideas. There's just you're with us or against us has become our political narrative. And to have two parties like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, it feels to me that the way the narrative of the parties have mutated in our sane reality, the way they have mutated is that it's justifiable. You feel tribally encouraged to be angry or even hate the other side, your neighbors. So it's almost...
But they're the bad guys.
...a virtue to talk shit about your neighbors. If you are blue and they are red, then you have license to assail them for some reason. You have license
to hate them, think badly of them, look down on them, belittle them, tease them, diss them, joke about them around the bonfire.
Which, it used to be a little more that way from the right, making fun of the left, the latte-sipping liberals, the...
Precious snowflakes.
The intellectual elite as an insult, right? The intellectual elite as an insult. And now I see more and more people who identify on the left or would consider themselves liberal are now doing something very similar to that, which is justifying their stereotypical, stereotyping a Republican. Mm-hmm. And if somebody says they're a Republican, they're doing the same way people used to stereotype women or different races.
Right.
Except they've done it politically. It's almost like we've gotten it out of race to a degree. We've gotten it out of religion to a degree.
We don't always make jokes about how women are bad parkers.
Yeah, right. But now it's just moved into politics, and it's almost like you haven't gotten rid of that prejudice.
That desire to bully because you have also experienced harm.
Right. So now we're bullying each other politically because we've stopped bullying each other, or I wouldn't say stop. We have reduced the quantity of bullying on sexual, racial, nationalism, whatever the tribe is, right? But now it seems like that hatred has just gone into politics, and politics has become
the new field,
the willing receptacle for that kind of hatred.
It's now okay to bully people if it's
if they're
somebody
Republicans,
on the opposite political team,
right?
Yeah.
So that to me is, I don't know, I find that it's almost like the energy is neither created or destroyed. So it's almost like that kind of energy in the human condition doesn't get erased whenever you have civil rights.
Okay, so let me talk about that. Let's bring that back to the hook, because I think this is really going to be the key point over and over and over again. What is this energy? The energy, the need to bully, the drive to bully. Where does the drive to want somebody who's lesser than you so that you can feel better about yourself? Where does that come from? That comes from being put down and treated like shit when you were younger. You don't need to put other people down if you think well of yourself. You don't need to diss people if you're having a good time. If someone's actually having a good time, would they be hateful? If someone were having a good time, would they make jokes at somebody else's expense? If somebody were having a good time, would they belittle someone for having different opinions? And obviously, we're not just talking about someone who has a different opinion that makes them think it's okay to fire someone for being gay. We're not talking about that kind of opinion. We're talking about people don't do bad things for no reason. So this energy that you're talking about, Dark, that is neither created nor destroyed, the energy of I need to have someone lower than me to diss, that comes from having been made to feel lesser. It comes from having been made to feel lesser, which generally originates in our childhoods with our primary caregivers and very close loved ones, oftentimes a teacher or a pastor or someone who was your babysitter or someone who was your one of your primary caregivers, caused you to feel lesser, which then creates this vacuum inside of yourself of not having a healthy way of feeling good about yourself. So you diss or make fun of in order to help yourself feel better. And we may not even be completely aware that we're doing that. Like, I was not always very aware. I was not always aware of the abuse cycle in my life and in my mind. It took a lot of sort of peeling back the onion skins of my mind to kind of get to the why. Yeah, but why do I do that? Yeah, but why do I do that? Okay, but why do I do that? Okay, but why do I do that? And get back to like these primal whys. A lot of people talk about what is your why as like your affirmative thing. Like why do you get up in the morning? You know, oh, my children or something like that. And I'm talking, that's great. That's really great. But being in a place in your life where you can talk about your primal affirmative why, a positive life-giving driving why, means that you've done some work or had the luxury to not have a negative why driving you. And we're talking about the negative whys, which is the traumas that cause us to do things without maybe meaning to do them. Like, you would not do that if you were not already suffering.
So I'm posting a link to a sort of, the name of the website is really, I guess, isn't all that important, but it's Leaving Babylon. I don't know if that's the thing. Yeah, Leaving Babylon. And it's an article about this cat named Robert Sapolsky. So he was a baboon. He studied baboons. So he wasn't a baboon. He studied baboons, and I almost feel like I don't want to give the spoiler away, but I'll just tell the story. But it's worth watching the video because it's pretty interesting. So Sapolsky is somewhere in Africa, and there's this band of baboons that he's been building a relationship with for like 13 years. Some of this stuff may not be totally accurate, but somewhere a long time. He's got a relationship with generations of these baboons.
Yeah.
So some safari comes through. You know, he goes by periodically and checks in and sees what's going on, studies the anthropology of the hierarchy of the baboons and how all that stuff works. Some safari touring group comes through. They left a bunch of meat behind. And it was in the fashion of the baboons, the larger bully males came out there and ate all the meat for themselves.
Okay.
Wouldn't let anybody else eat any of the meat.
And that's typical baboon culture?
And yes, and the meat was poisoned. And it killed all the alpha baboons. So suddenly you were left with the teenagers and the women and the babies.
Oh my God.
And it radically transformed the culture where what they would see before is an alpha would go slap a juvenile, and then the juvenile would almost immediately run off and go slap a baby.
Right.
You saw everything just happening.
Fuck you. No, fuck you.
Yes, right. And they would just, you would see it get passed down from stronger to weaker in this chain reaction that always happens.
The cycle of abuse, yeah.
So the alpha males poisoned themselves because they were greedy. And then what is left is a matriarchal a society formed. He was destroyed. He was like, oh my God, all my work is done. Right?
Oh no, the baboons are dead.
Right. And then he sees what happens is the women took charge. There was no more smacking each other. And when other roaming males came in from their baboon world to try to, pick up on a baboon chick, and they tried that alpha male stuff, they got trounced and kicked out by the moms and the grandmas.
No abuse in this tribe.
And so it transformed the nature of the tribe when the abuser finally got muzzled.
Wow.
And the people who were tired of the abuse made sure that it didn't come back up.
They were like, you know what? It's actually really nice that we're not getting slapped around
what a
all
break
the time.
To not be getting slapped around.
Like this?
Yeah, we could do it like this.
It could be like this?
So I posted a link in the comments on the Facebook thing to... his name is Robert Sapolsky. If you put in baboons and Robert Sapolsky, you'll find a multitude of articles that have been written about that, his work.
You know, that is kind of a tangential, like if we ask these questions, it's really just all about asking questions and then asking some more questions. Like why do people bully? Because people bully because they were bullied. Okay. So what if somebody's having a good time, then they wouldn't feel the need to treat somebody else like shit. And it's like, okay, but like a lot of people treat each other like shit. Okay, but why is that? Because a lot of people are not having a good time.
I think a lot of people are dreaming of the bullies eating a bunch of poison meat and dying off. And I don't know if that's the most practical hope for social transformation. I think it is possible. And this is the growing narrative that in order to stop the cycle of abuse, you yourself have to analyze your own desire to punish people because of the way that you were treated.
Yeah.
And that means having to radically transform yourself and be in conversation with yourself in a productive way versus a punitive way with yourself. Because often the punitive things that come out are because
of that voice
inside our
talking
head.
to me.
Right. So you have to change your own dialogue in order to stop wanting to spank folks.
Right.
In a negative way.
So I do want to, we made that disclaimer at the beginning that like these conversations are not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Dark and I are social extremophiles. We both came from groups where we were told what to do and how to think about the universe. And we didn't know, at least I didn't know, that the way I had been told to think about the universe was not the way the universe was in totality until things started going so wrong I needed to question my reality. And a lot of people have never had something go so wrong that they need to question their reality. But I do want to... I think that I've been thinking about the word offense. Like, you offended me. I didn't mean to offend you. Part of me was sort of feeling like if I were to say to you, I didn't mean to offend you, it's like me putting my actions off on you. I didn't mean for my actions to make... I didn't mean for you to feel badly about my behavior.
Right.
Which is making it all about you. Instead of me saying, I didn't mean to hurt you. Like myself. Or, I'm sort of trying to tease it out. Like, okay. I know this is this is a long form, right? So,
right.
So, what am I trying to say? If let's just get real. Let's get real with our example.
Let's get real.
So I'm on my period and I'm depressed and anxious. And I'm just now getting to the point in my life at 32 and a half where I've decided I need to stop being mad at my body for doing things to me that I didn't choose.
That's been a condition you've.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always hated my body for making me feel ways I didn't mean to feel, for making life harder for me, like physically harder because everything hurts and it feels like my bones are crumbling into stone and falling onto the ground. Like, and so I'm trying to practice like being like, no, my body is me.
Not some other thing.
Not some other thing.
Right.
And if my body isn't feeling well, then I am not feeling well. And if I am not feeling well, then it is okay for me to go a little slower. And part of that has been verbalizing with my partner, like, hey, just so you know, today I feel like everything's pointless.
Yeah.
And I'm really tired, you know? And so I've been verbalizing that for the last couple of days. And this morning, we were driving and I was like, so just so you know, today I feel, and Dark said, a little pissy.
Yeah.
And I was like, you ladies know that like this conversation suddenly ended.
Yeah, it's dangerous. I knew I was going into potentially dangerous territory.
Yeah, I was like, and then that's the moment where I can be like, actually be pissy all day.
Right.
Or say, he meant it as a joke. He's actually really supportive, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, no, I actually mean to say that I feel like there's no reason to be doing anything, but I am a little less tired than I was yesterday, so that helps. You know, the mood is already improving.
That's better communication.
And then later on in the drive, he was like, I'm sorry I offended you, darling. And I was like, bitch, you didn't offend me. You did a wrong thing. My feelings about what you did don't change what you did. And I had this whole like satori in my head while I was driving of like just philosophically tearing apart the phrase, sorry I offended you.
Ah, yes.
Which is very funny.
Right.
So that's very, I don't even remember why I was bringing all of
that's
that
pretty
up.
good. Because to say, sorry I offended you does put it off on the other person that they couldn't handle the joke. Or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
When it's actually about...
Actually, what I said was insensitive
when
to the
you
person.
already know I'm not feeling well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I can take jokes.
Yeah.
I can. Sam says these sorts of things can also go inward rather on other people. Abuse can make people bully themselves. That's true, and I want to talk about that because I think when people experience abuse coming in, you can either turn to self-harm or other harm.
Mm-hmm.
You can pay it forward or pay it inward. And neither of those things is actually you stopping the cycle of abuse. Just because you're not hurting other people doesn't mean that you have ended the cycle of abuse and healed it and capped it off and seared the wound and put a prosthetic hand on it and made it useful and moved on with your life. Sam also said, didn't you know that as long as you say with all due respect, you can say whatever you want to someone without fear of hurting them?
With all due respect.
With all due respect, which means you're about to get not respected.
You're acting like a bitch right now, with all due respect.
With all due respect, your hormones are dumb. I got a lot of thumbs up from Amelia during that period rant.
Oh, good.
She was like, thumb, 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 thumb. Trauma.
All right. Trauma. Hey, I did some research on trauma today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I've never used the word trauma so much in my entire life. Since
it starts to look weird when you see it too much.
Yeah, but the word keeps coming up for me because I am trying to be more clear about what I'm seeing in my friends.
Yeah.
Are my friends being jerks, or are my friends suffering some kind of ongoing systemic trauma?
Yes.
And
so
it
may
even
be causing them to be jerks.
And they're being jerks to me, but do I just stop at them being jerks, or do I say, what is that behavior? What is this trauma? You know, like, and so suddenly I'm like, oh, that's trauma, and
yeah,
I guess that's trauma too.
Well, and then you start being like, well, but if everything's trauma, does
Right.
trauma even exist? And I'm like, yes, it does, and everybody's got it, and none of us know how to take care of ourselves.
Well, so we can talk about traumas,
and that's a lot of blanket statements.
And we can talk about PTSD. Now, PTSD is traumas that have become internalized and become they just hang out with you. Mm-hmm. Now, you can suffer a trauma and get over a trauma. And there's different kinds of trauma. So this is the stuff, like, I just want to go down maybe a lexicon a little bit and sort of just we can orient ourselves in the trauma lounge and figure out what's out there. So
and I have a list too I want to go through later of like, you may have experienced trauma if.
So I looked up trauma. I'm like, what are different kinds of trauma? And it's like the 4 kinds of trauma, the 3 kinds of trauma, the 8 kinds of trauma. So I'm going to read some of these different kinds of trauma. Apparently it's an evolving field. There's acute trauma, which results from a single stressful or dangerous event.
Right.
So a dog attacked you when you were 4, and now dogs are just scary as hell forever.
Oh, that's a whole nother conversation. We have to make sure we go back to the dog conversation.
Okay. So there's chronic trauma, which is the result from repeated and prolonged exposure to highly stressful events. Examples include cases of child abuse, bullying, or domestic violence. So that's chronic trauma. That's not necessarily one event.
And it might not seem like a really big deal because it just happens to you
reality.
a little bit over time.
Right. That's the trauma that I think a lot of people miss.
Just a pushy, sleazy boss forever.
When fireworks go off, I don't cringe. However, I find myself acting weirdly in social situations because of. That's right. Some chronic trauma stuff. Complex trauma, which is the results from exposure to multiple traumatic events. So complex trauma could be people who work in like surgical trauma units. That can be complex trauma where suddenly there were like 4 people you couldn't have saved, but you could have.
You could have. And it's a super negative experience tied to your super positive feelings of wanting to save people.
Right. So that was the first thing I saw of 4 different kinds of trauma. Somewhere else I got down here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's chronic, acute, and complex are the ones that I keep seeing all the time.
Medical News Today. This is a little excerpt I pulled out on their idea of traumatic experiences. They said some research estimates that 60 to 75% of people in North America experience a traumatic event at some point. So maybe not everybody, but they're saying 60 to 75% experience a traumatic event at some point.
I would like to do an exercise later in the show where we just fantasize about what a non-traumatized individual would have experienced.
Right.
If you made it to 25 untraumatized, that means you didn't experience these things. Let's talk about that in a little bit.
So that's North America. I guess they're talking about the continent.
Okay.
The charity Mind in the United Kingdom lists the following as potential cases of trauma.
Okay.
Causes of trauma. Bullying, harassment, physical, psychological, or sexual abuses, sexual assault, traffic collisions, childbirth can be a traumatic event for both parties. Life-threatening illnesses, a sudden loss of a loved one, being attacked, being kidnapped, acts of terrorism, natural disasters, and war. These are all possible causes of traumas.
So trauma is
and they're talking about traumatic events.
That's acute trauma.
Right.
And these trauma is one of those words where trauma could be the thing that happened to you and also the feeling you carry around in you.
So that's where we get into
it's both.
The main theme that I want to talk to our guest on Thursday about, which is something he calls the amygdala hijack.
Woot woot.
Now that's talking about actually the effect of trauma on the physical brain, not the mental brain, but on the physical brain.
The mind-body connection is real, folks. I'll look it up.
I got it. I got it right here, actually. There's also a whole thing on trauma resilience. This is a...
Could be good, could be bad. Emotional
trauma and the amygdala. So, the amygdala is a section, now this is from highspringsclinic.org. Can emotional trauma cause brain damage?
Yes.
So, emotional trauma of the amygdala. The amygdala is a section of nervous tissue in the brain that is responsible for emotions, survival instincts, and memory. A major role of the amygdala is to detect fear. It recognizes and gathers information around us to determine threats. By using our senses, such as sight and sound, the amygdala will respond with the feeling of fear if it perceives a threat. This all happens unconsciously deep in our brains. When affected by PTSD, the amygdala becomes hyperactive, Those who suffer from emotional trauma will often exhibit more fear of traumatic stressors than others. Often, stimuli can trigger overactivity of the amygdala, somehow connected to the traumatic event a person suffered from. This might lead to chronic stress, heightened fear, and increased irritation. This might also make it harder for those suffering to calm down or even sleep.
So, sidebar, a lot of people, people are like, oh yeah, childbirth, sure, it could be traumatic, maybe sometimes for the woman. Childbirth is highly traumatic for the woman much of the time, but especially in the US, we have systems of support that are very lacking. And all of the moms get together and they're all like, well, but your birth was traumatic and your birth was traumatic and your birth was traumatic. So I guess it wasn't really traumatic. That's just what birth is. And that's a problem that we have in the U.S. And as more and more women get the support that they should be having during childbirth and have less and less traumatic labors, we're beginning to realize that it doesn't need to be that traumatic. But it's not just traumatic for the mom. There are ongoing case studies that connect childhood anxiety, night terrors, bedwetting with such things as having to have had a C-section or having had the cord wrapped around your neck or having been stuck in the birth canal for too long and unable to breathe for longer than an infant is
so that affects the brain.
It affects the brain, and they're just like, I don't know, my kid's just really anxious all the time, or he just has nightmares really easily, and it's like these things don't happen for no reason.
No, I had a friend of mine who was like born at like 5 months or something, and he always felt like the preemie.
Yeah. In what ways?
Just in the world. He always felt a little too soft, a little too fragile, a little too new, a little too
like a tiny purse dog. Like everything's a little scary.
He's a famous TV writer now, but he had to compensate, I guess.
Which was his particular response to trauma, probably because he didn't have the support that he needed to feel safe.
Right.
Because he was born into a traumatic situation where he did not feel safe.
He was born to his mom had been in Auschwitz. So she had some traumas going on there too.
Oh my Lord.
Right?
Okay. So lizard brain, hind brain. Mercurius RX is back on Twitch with us for season 2. So I'm really excited about having them back, and talking about that the amygdala hijack is very similar to the lizard brain. I think that's what we're talking about. We, at least in the modern U.S., which is the only experience I can speak to, tend to pride ourselves on being in control and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps and doing the right thing and making choices. And a very large part of our psyches is still instinctive reactions. And our instinctive reactions are informed by positive and negative imprints early on in life, such as trauma or a very pleasant experience when you were coming on sexually, maybe seeing a friend's mom at a party with high heels on.
Oh, ouch.
And so like you have these imprints in your hindbrain. You're like, I don't know. I never thought about why I like heels. It just really gets me. These things are created in our hindbrain or our lizard brain. We didn't choose them to happen.
So you just suddenly. One of my favorite examples is we had an Airbnb guest that stayed here at the consulate.
Oh my God.
And he was talking about getting a haircut, and he said how he didn't like getting.
He just put it off for forever.
Yeah, I just don't like getting haircuts. And Ainsley said, "Why did like a barber cut your ear when you were a kid?" And he sort of went, "Ding."
They did.
He just hadn't put it together.
He just never wondered.
No.
This is that Judeo-Christian thing of like, life is shitty. We should just all wait for heaven. And you're born sucky. Try to fight it.
Everything sucks.
So for him, not liking haircuts, he's just like, well, I just don't like haircuts. You don't dislike things for no reason. You don't dislike things for no reason.
That's a broad general statement, maybe not backed up in all cases. But
tell me.
I don't know.
Let's talk fight.
No. I'm inviting a fight from
our guests.
Yeah.
If you think there's anything that you dislike for no reason, I will fight you about it.
Something you dislike for no reason.
You just dislike it. My mom loves creamed spinach. And we ate it too much.
Oh, so that's why you don't like it.
It just makes me barf.
Too much.
Bananas, way too much.
Ooh.
But I think some of that can be genetic.
That you don't like cream spinach?
Well, like pheromones.
Oh,
I love peanut butter. I don't know why I love peanut butter. I think there can be some genetic predispositions to things, just like somebody can be genetically predisposed to be perhaps a little sociopathic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. but also a lot of, like, somebody can be chemically born without empathy necessary to function normally in society. That's possible. I don't think it happens as often as we think it does.
Yeah.
I think when we look at school shooters and people who kill animals and people who abuse women and people who abuse other races, those visceral expressions of abuse are probably, I would say, maybe 95% of the time, at least, maybe more. I haven't looked at sociopathic rates, but I think much of the time when people enact that kind of abuse on their environment, it's because they were abused.
We reward sociopathic behavior in the sort of, in the American paradigm. The American business model is really all about profits over people.
Right.
So if you are more okay with firing these people and making these people work harder with less pay, you will have a probably a better career that will be rewarded more than somebody who's like, well, you know, this guy's been here for 20 years, and we might have to absorb a little bit of our profit margin, but you know, he's put in a lot. He's been a part of the. Yeah, you're probably not going to go very far. So we reward sociopathy.
Profit margin is sociopathy,
and so then you end up having sociopaths managing hordes of people, and this is the bullying. This is like institutional bullying. This is institutional trauma, because those folks, when they're looking at like, wow, these units, these human resources over here, we can just cut a few out. And some people can't look at humans that way. And they're not going to end up managing a lot of humans.
Yeah.
In the current
system.
General capital, you know, in, what are they calling this? Late stage capitalism. So we've unleashed sociopaths, and you can look at our economic situation as a society and the income inequality, and you can find people who it may not be tens of millions of sociopaths, it might just be 20 that are affecting hundreds of millions of people.
Right.
When you look at the handful of billionaires that have no problem paying people money, where then I have to pay the rest in welfare for the people because they can't afford to live for whatever, Jeff Bezos or something like that. You know, where they
that sentence got a little
yeah, it's just like it's just a number where if I do this, looking at the current economic zeitgeist, I can get away with paying my people crap because they need the job.
Yeah.
And then I could make become on my way to a trillionaire. So it doesn't take a lot of sociopaths to really train wreck a society.
All right, I Googled how many people in the world are sociopaths, which is different from psychopaths.
Right.
Sociopaths
Could be a benevolent sociopath.
Are good at getting along. They just don't naturally have the same empathies that we do. Like, I won't kick you out in order to hike the rent for a new renter because I would feel sick to my stomach for weeks if I did that. A sociopath doesn't kick you out to hike the rent for a new renter because they understand the long-term social implications of being that landlord.
Right.
Not because they have the gut feeling of, I would be a horrible human.
It's a calculated thing.
Calculation. Yeah. Calculated social participation. Psychopaths are not trying to participate socially.
Right.
So we're talking about genetic predispositions, chemical predispositions such as, maybe whatever your mom was on.
Right. Maybe lead.
Maybe lead from your environment because you grew up in a mining town. And traumatic predispositions such as even something as early as not being able to breathe in the womb for a while before you were born. Like those are like really early on. And then you get into, then once you're born, then you're being shaped by the behaviors of the people around you in your environment.
Right.
So I just Googled how many people in the world are sociopaths, which is people that don't naturally get along, but they choose to operate in society calculatedly, right?
They follow the rules.
Yeah. 1 in 100 people are sociopaths. Politica fact.
Okay.
Sociopaths and psychopaths are true intentions revealed. At least 1 in every 25 people is a sociopath.
Wow.
Let's see. Statistics. These are just Google headlines. I'm going to look into this more because I really, how to spot a sociopath. Hint, it could be you, the Daily Beast. A dishy book from an avowed sociopath, written by a sociopath, has stirred up an awkward debate. Perhaps all of us have a little bit of this personality disorder.
All right.
So then are we actually talking about a genetic chemical predisposition towards a lack of empathy, or a developed condition that has deadened our empathy because of the mad environment we were raised in?
Right. So as a kid,
I have my little tiny sociopathic moments.
Oh, yeah.
And tendencies because of the deadening of the society that I'm struggling to be happy in all the time. Is that the same thing as being born a sociopath?
I think being Gen X and raised when TV, the 80s were all about glitz and glam. It was all about wealth beyond anything you could ever use. Lifestyles of the rich and famous. It was a TV show that just showed excess as the goal. And that's why I went to Los Angeles to be a movie star.
So that you could have that thing?
I wanted to be, because that was basically, they were touting, like, if I have this money, I also get all the bitches. That's the implication.
Right.
So it is like, it totally goes into that sort of primate hindbrain hierarchy. How do I have all the bitches? Money. And so, like, 80s and the 90s were just this insane roller coaster of acceptable greed. It used to be a little gauche to be that way, but then suddenly it was like, no, we can have whatever we want whenever we want, and if I don't do it, somebody else will. That kind of whole thing. And I was a kid. I fell for it. I was like, I want to go get rich and famous so I can do whatever the hell I want and not have to listen to anybody anymore, because I was in a very repressive system that I was being raised in with my family.
You had no freedom of choice.
No freedom of choice. So to me, money was freedom of choice. So it was an escape module.
Right.
That I went after.
You could be loved.
But as
if you had money, you could be loved.
As I was hustling in LA, I saw a lot of people who wanted a hell of a lot more than I did, and they were willing to make choices that I wasn't willing to make. Of stepping on friends, again, dollar over the people kind of thing.
Right.
It just got a little too squishy for me. I didn't want to do it.
Right.
And then there was this trend towards like, okay, maybe the pitchforks would come out if we don't start being a little more classy with our excess.
Mercurius RX has brought up an example from maybe the early days of the internet. I never saw this thing or heard this story, but they said it reminds me of those kids filming the guy who was drowning in the frozen lake instead of getting help. Humanity is a spectacle, something used for clicks, not to relate and be a part of. So that's a statement.
Yes.
Are you saying that's how you view humanity, or that's how those kids view humanity? I think in this case, I wonder, I immediately go into like, the best case scenario would be that this man had been one of their teachers and was diddling them in gym school. And they were glad that he was dying.
So you start rationalizing.
I do.
Right.
And at the core of it, the hope is that the reason children would watch someone suffer is because they knew he was getting it.
Wow.
He should be getting it. Like, that would be the core. That would be the best case scenario in my mind, is that those kids knew that guy deserved it.
I'm pretty sure you're not a sociopath.
Thanks.
Because you immediately go to like the most humanitarian.
I'm trying to figure. Okay, but that's like the best case scenario. That's like the teeniest, tiniest core. Probably not the case. What next layer out? Next layer out.
I like how you just concocted that whole story on the fly, just like how to justify them filming this guy drowning.
Yeah. And maybe that's just me being like pointlessly optimistic about humanity and society. Uselessly optimistic. Some people are mad at me about that.
Right.
Next layer out in my hypothesis would be he hadn't been directly harming them, but they knew that he was a harmful person.
Oh, so you're just looking down stair steps
of morality.
Of morality.
Yeah.
Right.
So third layer out would be these kids are in abusive situations where they have no control and adults are constantly putting control onto them. And it is relieving for them. It is so psychologically relieving for them to see an adult out of control that they don't realize that they're letting him die.
Oh,
because it's so relieving for it to be the adult not in control for once because they never get to have control over their lives.
All right, let me go. You want to hear the path I went down?
Yeah, what was the path you went down?
Clicks. Just what he said. Those folks are so, like, looking through the lens is different than looking at the guy on the lake.
So you're saying they'd been journalists so long that they stopped seeing the humanity that they were filming?
I don't know if I would call them journalists.
Yeah, but that's what journalists do.
Somebody who might be able to finally get the likes they wanted.
Yeah, that's what journalists do.
Is that right?
Every movie I've ever watched about a journalist or a news anchor is them going rabidly crazy in the middle of the night, rushing to a burning building and not calling 911 because they're going to be the first person to tell people about that story. It's going to be their big break.
There's that. Yeah, sociopaths everywhere.
Like Butte's own beloved news anchor.
Yes.
I've driven past bad things happening in town.
Yeah.
And he's often there before first responders.
Well, he's got a scanner.
Right. But I mean, like that's like, but he's there filming the thing
right
before the first responders show up.
Right.
And like, to me, that's kind of like,
well,
it's a little like,
is he going to go like put the fire out of the building with a garden hose? I would do the same thing. I would totally like, you know, I saw when the old ice cream factory burned down.
Yeah.
I didn't get there before the first responders, but I definitely was there with my camera filming the end of a building.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, a building's a little bit different than a guy drowning in a lake.
Yes, true.
Right. So.
But that again, I think when you look through the lens, it becomes.
Yeah. Or you're trying to get the story for your big break.
Or whatever. It sounds like these were a couple of kids, but.
Yeah. I'm just saying it's the same motivation. Because they're trying to get their big break too.
Clicks. Which then maybe
internet,
they'll get attention, and then maybe they'll get all the bitches.
And then maybe they'll get money, and then maybe they'll be able to get out.
Right. Okay, I'll go with that.
So these are some best case scenarios. But also, Sam brings up executions were public events for a disgustingly long time, which my immediate thought in that case is a trauma-aware response. My immediate thought about how public executions were a thing for a long time is those people were starving and oppressed.
Yes. Making those public executions
and it feels so
also
good to know that there's somebody that's worse off than you.
Yeah.
Because you are starving and oppressed.
Yeah, I think the public spectacle of it definitely keeps those oppressed people not super anxious to do something to risk their own disembowelment.
Those suckers stole bread from the king's keep. I would never. I'll just starve. I'll just make peas porridge in the pot 9 days old one more time.
So we're doing versions of that with politics. I mean, the whole thing with Trump, it was like people just delighting every day, poring over every tweet to find a misspelling.
Yeah.
Just pure joy and delight at pointing to the bad man.
The ongoing public execution of Donald Trump's respectability.
Yeah, which I didn't think he was respectable when he went in.
Yeah, but that's still what they were doing.
Yeah.
Is shredding any potential for anyone to like him.
Yeah. So that's sort of the same thing as the stocks. You know, he was just
putting himself in it.
Putting himself in the stocks for ratings. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Socially programmed. Humanity is a spectacle, something to be used for clicks, not to relate to or be a part of. That part is socially programmed. I wonder if there's a generational thing going on here between Mercurius RX and kids who film things for Facebook clicks or YouTube clicks. You know,
or it could be like, you know, I see that.
Yeah.
The fever for recognition.
Yeah. Well, so walk me through it, because I had a cell phone that I could film things with when I was 22 for the first time in my life. I didn't grow up with the ability to film things.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't grow up with the ability to film things and put them on the internet.
Right.
I couldn't film things and then put them on the internet until I got like an unlimited plan 6 years later.
Right. You were homeschooled, not in public school. So public school is always about like that. It's a different thing. Yeah. You're always you're going to be in one click or another click, whether you say so or not. So you're either passively in a group, or you're being passively shoved into a group, or you are jockeying for position in a group, and you didn't grow up that way.
Well, I'm just talking about, I'm trying to imagine the pathway that a human mind could go down to get them to the point where they choose to film someone drowning instead of calling 911.
See, this is where your parents would see they didn't have Jesus.
That's such a canned answer.
It's an easy out.
Well, but walk me through it. Can you yourself hypothesize a pathway where a human would, how would you get
I didn't see the video, so I don't know what all the story is.
Yeah.
But apparently, guy falls through the ice, drowns, kids film the drowning.
Instead of calling 911.
Instead of running off to try to get some help, right? Or trying to do something.
Yeah. Maybe they had already called 911 and they filmed it anyway.
Maybe they called 911 and they filmed it, right? But I think, man, I lived in a big city and I saw all kinds. And there's some people who are super desensitized because they see people die around them all the time. They see that damage all the time. They see worse stuff happening. They see people living that had wished they had died. So I can see the desensitization of the value of a life if you are surrounded by it's the environment that you're raised in. There's a lot of feral kids in this country.
That's a whole nother thing I don't know anything about.
There's a lot of feral kids that just like the parents are just not there. I don't know how many of my friends started like parenting their siblings and finding a way to pay rent and do things when they were like 12 or 13. Yeah.
Mercurius RX says, I still grew up with shock culture and live leak. It was entertainment to see awful things, a dare almost to see who can stomach the gruesome deaths of people or mutilations. Desensitization through digital media is all I'm talking about.
When I was a kid, there was the video you could rent at the local video store. It was called Faces of Death. And it was highly controversial because it was just stock footage that people with cameras had caught of people dying. Getting shot, falling off buildings.
So what causes a human to turn to something like that to watch it?
And it's one of those dare things. I think I can speak to the male experience.
Okay.
Which is, guys are always daring guys to do dumb things all the time. And so the idea for me, it was like,
why do guys dare? Why would a boy dare another boy to watch somebody's death video?
I think if it goes back to the primitive brain, it really is about always trying to prove yourself in battle, of showing that you're tougher than somebody else.
Right.
You can stomach something that somebody else will throw up. That makes you stronger. Therefore a better warrior. Therefore
better mate.
All the bitches.
That's what it comes back to for the boys.
It does. It always just comes back to that.
Right.
At least that's been my experience as a human on the planet.
Yeah.
As a male human on the planet.
As a straight male.
As a straight male human on the planet.
Right.
Whatever. So, that I never watched it when I was a kid. My parents wouldn't let me watch it. And
why didn't your parents let you watch it? How do they know about it?
I didn't have a car. I had to go with them to the damn store to buy the stuff.
Oh, it was a videotape.
Yeah, this is pre-internet. This is like 85 or something.
Well,
no internets. So you have to go
get
the physical thing.
So there was a VHS at Blockbuster Video.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have
people dying.
Yeah, it was called Faces of Death. You can look it up. And it's just stock footage of people dying. In various ways that have been caught on newsreels or war footage or whatever.
Jeez.
And so that was for the hardcore. That was for the hardcore dudes. And the girls, too. The girls would be like, I ain't afraid. I'll go watch the Faces of Death. And you just watch people get snuffed out. It was sort of like a legitimate snuff film because it was journalism. It wasn't, they didn't kill somebody for the video.
Right.
The video just happened to catch somebody dying.
So,
and that was like
gore porn,
yes, and that's a step up from like we were weaned on dead baby jokes.
I would watch this. Why would I watch this?
What's red and white and goes around 100 miles an hour?
What?
Baby in a blender.
Oh my god!
You just do, and they just had 1 billion dead baby jokes.
Trigger warning.
Right. So you do it because you already know it's gross, right? So people are telling jokes, and then you tell a dead baby joke, and then everybody's like, ugh, and that's the look that you're going for. It's not the laugh.
That is you having power.
It's you having power because you cast a spell on that person and grossed them out.
You caused them.
Right.
You caused them. That's what it is.
Yes.
It's your power comes from you causing them to have something happen to them.
Right. And that was my stance with Donald Trump during season 1, was that Donald Trump was a gross out joke for the right. People, because the left was so traumatized by Trump, I know the right-wing folks that
Many right-wing people.
The ones, I'm not saying all of them, I know specific characters that would always like to trumpet about their love of Trump just to watch the liberals cringe, melt, like instantly hate them.
How could we be the same species?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And part of it was like they didn't have any feelings about it. They just wanted to make a liberal suffer. And so they talk about Trump because it's a dead baby joke. It's the political dead baby joke.
Yes, many Republicans are not as married to Trump as liberals were married to hating him. They were
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what made him the greatest dead baby joke ever. Is that you got to make fun of the idea of the intellectual elite, the idea that the liberals were the white collar, and the right are the blue collar. This is the old traditional view, right? So it's like getting back at management. That's what Donald Trump was, getting back at management. Dead baby joking every time you put on a Trump hat and put a Trump flag on. It was like, fuck you to the management.
Why would I want to watch something like that?
Which one?
Faces
Donald
of Death.
Trump or
no Faces of Death? Like,
wait, you just said that you would watch it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's called morbid curiosity.
Why do we have that? Why would I want to watch something horrible? Why would I want to watch something horrible?
I think it ties back to trauma. If you have had some bracing, it's like when you're a psychotherapist, you go through certain kinds of training to desensitize you so that when you finally have a client that says that they ate their own baby, you can be cool about it and at least get to safety or not disrupt the thing, right? You always have to say, no matter what the person says.
Right.
And you don't just automatically do that. You have to be desensitized.
You have to go through training.
You have to go through training. And I think there's something in the like, if we're talking about traumatic events happening to us, this is a way to gird yourself against a prospective, I think on a hindbrain level, gird yourself against a prospective possible trauma in the future.
It is sort of like I look at the video cases, right? Or like the screenshots of things that happen in the movie, and I'm kind of like, I want to know what that's like. It's sort of the feeling, I think. And I don't know why I want to know what that's like.
How high does a body bounce when it falls off 30 stories?
Yeah, or like, why do I want to know what that's like? Almost like I want to watch these people go through it because then I can empathize with, and I'm not saying empathize in a lovely way. I'm saying my desire is to
understand,
watch, and that's why it's called porn.
Yeah. Well,
because I'm going through what they're feeling. I would be watching it and going through whatever the person being mauled by a bear is feeling. But also not dying.
But not dying. A similar reason why people watch horror movies is to be scared in a safe environment.
Oof. I don't know what that says about myself.
I don't think it's an uncommon thing.
Mercurius RX is wondering if we'll ever get beyond these lizard brain undercurrents.
If we survive, I think so. I think we're definitely heading towards like a self-fulfilling apocalyptic prophecy. Like we could be having a much better time than we are with each other, and we're just not because we've let the sociopaths run the house. So the 1 in 100 or whatever are defining the narrative because they're profiting off the narrative. And so I think if we could, I don't have any hope that like the baboons in Sapolsky's case, suddenly the alphas got neutralized by poisoned meat. I don't have the hope that suddenly that's going to happen to the sociopaths that value money over people.
Right. We're not just suddenly going to be free of the actual 14 billionaires ruining the planet.
So I have hope that some narrative will arise. that some narrative will be able to, where people go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we could be having a better time with each other, and we're not. I just didn't know we couldn't. And this is the whole part of being raised in these bubbles, where like you just suffer ongoing trauma, and so life is that trauma. And if you've never had the experience of not having that pain, it's like that, you know, if you have chronic pain and you just learn to live with it, and then it starts to shape you because of your compensation for the pain, and you feel pain-free for a moment. This is why heroin is so popular, because people can sometimes feel OxyContin. Suddenly I didn't know I was in so much pain.
And now,
until I didn't feel it.
Yeah.
And if some event, some narrative could occur where people would say, we could be having a better time right now.
We are having a worse time than we realized.
We're still living in this Judeo-Christian, I guess life blows, and then I'll get to go to the club.
Someday,
behind the pearly
everything
gates
will be better when we get to heaven. We shouldn't expect to be having a happy or healthy time now.
So that's like a hardcore, literal, fundamentalist narrative of Christianity. There's plenty of other kinds of Christianity.
Hashtag not all Christians.
Not all Christians. However, what I find fascinating is it's endemic in the narrative of the society. So people who consider themselves atheists are also still sane enough in the Judeo-Christian narrative society that they're not going to buck that Christian narrative that life blows.
Right.
And then when it's over, it's over.
We just have to make it through to heaven.
But the atheists don't think there is a heaven.
Right. They just still are like, I just accept that it sucks.
I accept that it sucks.
Granted,
Yeah.
I don't know many atheists.
I know a lot of atheists.
I know a lot
and atheists tend to say, well, because I think I only have this one and only life, I think we should be better to each other. There's that whole atheist thing. We should be better to each other. We should be enjoying ourselves. We should be doing the 7th-generation thing and make sure the next people that come through the door have a good time.
Well, now I know a lot of people who are not Christians, but I don't know a lot of atheists.
I think you know more than you know, because they don't wear the symbol on their car and around their neck.
I talk with almost everybody about what their religious beliefs are. I know a lot of people who are not Christians.
Right.
And which is different than a intentionally philosophical atheist.
Oh. Well, we should have an atheist on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any atheists out there want to be a guest? Zoom in for a future episode of Post-Orthodoxy, please. Say so in the comments, or you can message us on the Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page.
Someone who like truly believes that there is no God, and not just because they hate Christianity. Like
not in reaction to Christianity.
Not in reaction to Christianity. I want to interview an atheist who is an atheist, but not in reaction to Christianity.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying.
So, trauma. Why are we talking about trauma?
That's where we started from.
I think Mercurius RX's question, if only we can shift... No, previous one. We'll never get beyond these lizard brain undercurrents, will we?
Oh.
Sadnesses. I think having trauma-aware conversations and becoming more trauma-aware with ourselves and becoming more trauma-aware with our loved ones is how we will get beyond lizard brain undercurrents. And it's not going to, I don't know that it's going to be a getting beyond lizard brain undercurrents. I think it's going to be becoming aware of and working with ourselves wholly.
Shining some light on it.
WHOLLY. What would it be like to be whole? To be a person who wasn't always dissing themselves and fighting themselves and hating themselves.
Or just objectifying their lizard brain as the devil, some outside force coming to get them.
Right. My sin nature.
Yeah.
The fact that I want to bang or want to eat or want to sleep or don't want to work or want to, whatever it is, instead of separating that part of yourself, these instincts.
Yeah. You could actually have a communication with it rather than like, oh no.
Spanking it all the time.
Oh no.
No, and bad you, but actually bad me, So
yeah,
becoming trauma aware. I think becoming trauma aware will help us have a better time with ourselves. It will help us be more compassionate towards people around us who are causing harm, which will create pathways for people who are causing harm to then heal themselves. And granted, some people who cause harm need to face the consequences of their actions.
I like that idea.
And some people who cause harm so badly that one might make the case they don't get to reintegrate into society. Like, I talk about my family a lot, my parents a lot. Like, I feel as though my parents caused harm to me in the way that they raised me. That's not me saying that they're bad.
No.
I know that they were doing their best,
right.
And they had the best of intentions, and they tried really hard. And also at the same time, they caused me harm, and they don't want to talk about it.
Right.
They have said repeatedly that because they had the best of intentions, the harm that they caused doesn't need to be talked about. And trauma-aware conversations are saying, I am aware that my parents experienced trauma, which caused them to pay things forward to me. And I'm also aware that even though they experienced trauma, that we could still have a conversation where they own up with me that they caused me harm, even though they didn't mean to. And that would be the number one most healing thing for me as the person who experienced harm, is to have the person that caused the harm own it.
And
and you don't always get that. And you have to do the work yourself. There are several situations that I'm in my life right now where the people who have caused me harm are never going to say, I didn't mean to, but I'm still really sorry that I hurt you. And I have to do that work in myself. I have to find a way to heal that cycle of abuse and cap it off in myself in a healthy way. Without that person ever coming up. Sometimes the person has died.
Never know. Right.
Sometimes they've died. You know, some people have been abused or neglected by a parent who died.
But this is where a healthy society would be able to take on that work as an example.
Yeah.
For example, maybe sometimes governments apologize for atrocities they have committed. And they could say, it was a bad choice. And we feel like as a nation...
Governments apologize?
Yeah. As a nation, we need to come to terms with the wrong. That's what reparations are.
Okay.
Is they're like, okay, right, we were treating you not like humans, and now you are legally humans. So this could be sociopathic calculated of like, okay, you are full humans, and you got a bad deal because of that story.
Yeah.
So the nation benefited from slave labor. So the nation should at least give some reparations to the people who are suffering generational trauma, because otherwise the generational trauma will end up being something that has to be dealt with and policed. Right. If you have poverty and mental health issues,
absentee dads because they're in prison for
you
smoking
can't have
marijuana.
you can't have a safe society.
Yeah.
And so to have a safe society, you have to go back and say, we messed up and we'd like to try to find a way to make it good. On a larger level, doing that enables the people of the society to then see living examples on how to do it in much easier, much more manageable, scalable reparations. Being open and saying, like the 1950s was all about John Wayne to me was like the patron saint of the 1950s, which was, once I made up my mind, I make up my mind, and I don't care if there's any more new information. You're not going to shake my position because I'm strong.
Well, but specifically because of the world wars.
Yes, that was a part of the imprint for the kids, so they would be good, defend America no matter what.
Right.
Blue no matter who.
Those positions are born out of traumas.
Yep. Blue no matter who is a Trump trauma.
I am constantly hypothesizing and meditating on and fantasizing about what it would be like if we did not experience trauma. Like, which of all of the actions, if there's a pie of all the actions that a person does in their life, how many of those actions are actions and reactions that they do because of traumas they've experienced? Like what?
So,
like
and what
so
we're talking
much.
about with trauma is we're talking about trauma in relation to the baseline of society, and because religious what's it called syndrome?
Religious trauma syndrome.
Religious trauma syndrome. That's not going to be in the book because it might be in the book at some point. But once you put it in the book, that then opens up liability for pastors and institutions that are traumatizing children. That's why it's not in the book.
What? What do you mean?
It's only been around since 2011, the idea of religious trauma syndrome. If they say
the phrase.
Yeah, the phrase has only been recognized as a phrase. Some lady, I have her name.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, she started writing a series of essays and called it religious trauma syndrome, and said, yes, this is what some religious experiences have traumatized children. I have trauma around the idea of burning in a lake of fire forever. Like, I was told if I did X, then I would suffer unimaginable torment, and I had a great imagination.
I have trauma around the idea that if I like someone and want to kiss them, it makes me a slut.
Right, that's a trauma. So you start second-guessing your feelings all the, like you start battling your instincts or your hindbrain or whatever. I think when we're dealing with this notion of, Sam just said, I want to bring it up. Sam said, I wonder about the mechanism that causes someone to get a good feeling from harming someone beyond just, well, they were hurt.
So they hurt.
So...
Well, but isn't that the mechanism, though? Is I cannot stop the person who is hurting me or who was hurting me, and the only way to fill up the empty and brokenness inside of me is to feel stronger, and this person makes me feel weak by abusing me, so I will make that person make me feel strong by them being the person I abuse. But you're not thinking that when you're 7.
Right. And I think I would like to answer his question in a different way.
Okay, go for it.
Which is, I listened to a podcast, I need to find it and put it in the comments after the show. I listened to a podcast by this cat who was being interviewed. He and these two shrinks were being interviewed. One of them was the student of the guy that popularized the term cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance as an idea, as a theory, has only been around for about 70 years. So we didn't have terms for cognitive dissonance until recently. One example they gave of how cognitive dissonance works.
Andy Luttrell?
I don't know. No, he was the student. He was like a grad student of the main dude.
Right.
So they did an experience. This is one of the things that I learned about cognitive dissonance on a podcast 2 weeks ago. I like this example. So they do an experiment, and they pay somebody to lie. So they're in a room, and they've been given a task, and the task is hella boring. And they're like, we're going to pay you $1 to tell the next people that come in that this is a really interesting experiment, and it's really worth the $1. And it wasn't worth $1. And then we're going to pay somebody to do the same thing and pay them $20. And we're going to look at the way they then turn to the next person and try to sell them on the thing. And they thought because we paid them $20...
They would sell it more.
They would sell it more. But what they found is the people who were paid $1 sold it more because they had to find a way to justify screwing over somebody. Because they weren't getting enough money to make it worth the money. So they had to find some way to justify screwing that guy over for the $1, because $20 was like, it's a small lie, doesn't mean that much. It's a part of an experiment. So yes, I'll do that for $20, and I would feel no qualms about it.
But
doing it for $1,
no, wait,
no, for $20, they didn't really have the qualms about lying to somebody. Go do it.
Oh,
but when they paid them $1 to do it, they felt like this is not, I didn't get paid enough to really lie. But they want to be a part of the experiment. So they make up a way to justify lying to that person because the money didn't justify it. So they end up like downplaying that other person's experience. There's another example. I don't know if that one's not coming through.
No, I know the example because I've heard you tell me about it before, but it's basically like dissing the person. Yeah, no, I remember you telling me about those two examples, and it was you would have thought that they would think better about they made up even worse stories about that person. They had to fire someone.
So they had to fire somebody.
So here's a second example, guys.
Right, they had to fire somebody, and rather than feeling bad about firing them, feeling the pain and the empathy of having to fire somebody, they then made up a story of why that person deserved it. So they made up a story to justify the bad thing they did to that person.
Well, it's because they were lazy.
It's because they were lazy. It's because it's a competitive market.
They would make up a story that made that person a worse person in order
to justify their action.
In order to make it okay that I abused them.
Yes. That's
happened to us.
Yes.
People have spread worse and worse and worse lies about us to justify the original lie.
Right, because they got fired, they must have done something wrong.
So let's
make up.
They must have done something wrong.
We'll make up a story about how bad they are.
Otherwise, we did something.
We did something wrong. So that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in. That's why some people are so easily do bad things, is because they might feel bad about what they've done, but in order to justify it, they make up a story about the other person to otherize them.
Right.
To justify their actions.
Right. Which is what we do across the political spectrums.
Yes. I've done it.
We diss the person on the other side of the political spectrum to make it okay that I'm treating them horribly.
Yes.
They must be a super horrible person. The Republicans have to get worse and worse and worse because I'm treating them worse and worse and worse as a Democrat. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No.
Okay. So when I was growing up, I grew up Republican, even though we called the Democrats the special snowflakes or whatever.
Right.
We were making fun of them for being nicer than us.
Yes.
It was understood the Democrats were nicer.
Oh.
But it was
weaker.
That's the problem. That was the connotation.
Right.
They were too nice. They gave people free shit. They accommodated people's weaknesses.
So you had to justify that.
What?
So you have to justify demonizing them for being nicer than you by saying it's not really nice, it's weak.
Yeah. But yeah, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
That's okay. I was going to try and back up what you'd been saying.
Republicans.
Yeah, it's okay. Maybe we should wrap it up for the night.
Yeah. That sounds good.
We've had some really great interactions from people. We haven't stepped on each other's toes too much. We both get really excited about topics that...
This is a conversation, and I'm glad folks that joined in the conversation. And this is a primer for a conversation with somebody who has delved deeper into the amygdala hijack via traumatic experiences than we have.
Yes, and I'm going to keep researching and conversing, and we will probably talk about trauma again. I'm not exactly sure how to keep going back to subjects at this point, but I want to because they're very important.
Well, it's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing, and I think it's generational, as we were saying earlier today. I think the new kids are much more hip to what trauma is and how it works and how to take care of each other who have had a bad time than my generation. My generation still is a little bit of that, you can walk it off.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
Totally.
Probably will be, but
Well, thank you so much to Mercurius RX and Sam for participating so much. Thank you to David Hildebrand. His last comment was, most people who claim Christianity are really deists, which is a conversation I was familiar with growing up as an evangelical. Because people are like, oh yeah, well, Thomas Jefferson, blah, 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 was a Christian and he XYZ. And then we'd be like, no, he's really a deist, so he's not really a Christian. That was something that we...
Right.
Anything to justify not being able to do anything fun, because the other people that are doing things that are fun are not really Christians.
Obviously doing it wrong.
Obviously not.
Because I'm not having fun and I'm doing it right. So therefore.
Everybody else must be doing it wrong.
Everybody else has to be doing it wrong.
Thank you so much to all of our lurkers. We're constantly hearing from people who watch the shows but don't participate for various reasons.
Hello to the lurkers.
Hello to the lurkers. We really appreciate you. And I will remember to thank you more at the beginning of the show and the middle of the show as well. We'll see you guys on Thursday when we talk with Joseph Myers.
Sounds good. Thanks, folks. We'll see you on Thursday at 7 p.m. Montana time.
Thank you so much.